Oh, so today I'm going to talk about learning French. This might seem like a little bit of like a completely out of pocket video, but if you've been around for a while, or if you're on the other channel, you know I have been learning French for I don't know, like 12 years. I started learning French when I was a freshman in high school, and I was a minor in college. So I had 8 years of like formal French schooling when I was in high school. So I grew up in rural North Dakota, so we didn't have a French teacher. But I also grew up like long enough ago that it wasn't online either. I learned French through ITV. And if you're a little bit younger, you don't know what ITV is. It is where you would go to a room in your school that had these big TVs and cameras and microphones, and you would sit there with maybe a couple other people. My first year of learning French, I had like 6 or 7 other classmates from my school. Second year, I think I had like 3, and then the third year I was alone at when it was a 0 period, because I didn't have anybody else from other schools. Because that's another thing part of ITV is you sit there, and you've got your teacher comes in from, it's almost like a Zoom. A teacher comes in, and then other schools also come in, and then you're able to talk and you learn French, and you would fax your assignments over, and then she would grade them and send them back. And it was rife with cheating all the time because we had, especially the first year when I was a freshman, because we had such a big class, somebody was usually semi off camera, and so during tests, and we also didn't have a teacher in there supervising us, which we were supposed to have. The person who was semi off camera, which is actually normally me, would have the book open off camera, and then we would cheat all the time. So my first 3 years of French were learned through ITV, and that did give me a vague basis, you know, like basic pronunciation, basic stuff like how to say like what my name is, numbers, that sort of thing. And then when I was a senior in high school, I took all of my classes up at the college that my dad worked at. So I took freshman comp, I took history, and I took French again. And I started over again at 101. And so in college, there was an actual French professor. And so I took 5 years of college French. And by the end of it, it was just me again, because I went to a small college. It wasn't as small, obviously, as small as my high school. I graduated with 3 other people, but it was a relatively small liberal arts school in North Dakota. So the first couple of years of college French, 101, 102, 202, 201, 202, those were all kind of basic, like learning French things. And then they just threw you in the deep end. And so my next class after that was French in film, which was, we just watch movies in French. No subtitle. If there were subtitles, they would be French subtitles, which hurt me because I didn't really speak French all that much. And a bunch of the people in there were like native French speakers from like Africa, which was intimidating. But eventually, again, like I said, I was the only one left again. And so that was actually a thing. I mean, it was like basically one-on-one intense French instruction. And I think that did give me a very good basis for where I am right now. So right now, I've been trying to both keep up on my French and make it better. And like, because I think in college I was maybe at like, I want to say a solid 70-75% fluency. That might be, when I say that, I feel like that was definitely overstating it, but I feel like also I'm better than I think I am. I know I've gotten worse, but I have been trying a couple of different things. So let's talk about a couple different things about learning French. And obviously my experience is not entirely the same as everybody's, because I did have that 8 years of formal French instruction. So if you're starting off like completely, you know, without any of that might be different. But I've got a couple different things. First up, there's the obvious elephant in the room, Duolingo. At my height, I had like a 400-day Duolingo streak. I don't know how effective it is, but it's fun, and it's a way to keep you doing a little bit every day at the very least. Then there is the program that I used in college. That's the one that they did 101 for 202. They used French in Action. And I do this because I'm gonna editing Aurora, please put in a picture. And this was something that was, it's got videos, it's got, you know, listening exercises. The only problem with French in Action, I'm going to say, is that the listening exercises are difficult to find if you do not have, in college, the professor had like, I don't even know how, she sent us like a website that was like a secret website, and I couldn't find it again. What I ended up doing was I just stocked eBay and put a little notice out on French in Action cassettes. And eventually I did get a notice, because you could find them, buy them on cassette for like $200. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I eventually found them, parts 1 and 2, on cassette for like $50 a piece. And so that I had to buy them on cassette. And now I have them on cassette, so I can use them. But like, if you don't happen to have like a Walkman, which I do, I have cassette playing apparatuses. That doesn't sound, I think it's apparati, I don't know. If you don't have that like I do, that's going to be more difficult. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with French in Action. There's that. There is also this little book they had called Car French. It's like Learn French in the Car. It's for like 5-year-olds. I'm also working on a translation of Camille Desmoulins' work. Camille Desmoulins was a propagandist during the French Revolution. He's my favorite. He's my one true love, Camille Desmoulins, the French propagandist. He was guillotined, obviously, but I have not been able to find, and if there is one, let me know, because I'd love to read it, a English translation in print of his work. So I do have a French version, and so what I've been doing is just very slowly kind of working on translating those. And obviously there's difference because it's from the 18th century, but that's part of it, and that definitely also helps. There is a giant workbook that I have called Speak French in 30 Days. I don't know how useful it is. I've kind of dipped into it. It seems like that might be a good starting point if you don't really know anything. There is obviously Coffee Break French, which is a podcast. Again, a good starting point if you don't know anything. I've listened to the first couple episodes, and people have really mentioned how helpful Coffee Break French is for learning French. So I would probably, it's on Spotify. It's just a podcast. Each episode's like 15 minutes long. It's definitely useful. There's also reading books in French, and I have a handful of books that I'm reading in French. I have The Chocolate War in French, which I've read so many times that a couple of these I've read so many times that it just in English, that in French I can follow it no matter what. That's The Chocolate War and The Long Walk, and Lord of the Flies, which I haven't actually started yet, but I have. One of them is easy to read because it is written for a child, and that is Monster Blood, the third Goosebumps book. I would love to get more Goosebumps books in French. I collect, you can kind of see over there, on the other side of the clown there, the other side, over there. I have a massive collection of Goosebumps books. I would love to get more French Goosebumps books, but I have Sang de Monstre, which is my favorite Goosebumps book, so I got that one. And then there is Justine by the Marquis de Sade, which I decided to get in French for some godforsaken reason. So I've got those, and those obviously reading in another language is gonna help you. Obviously, how do you think all these foreign booktubers get so good at English? It's because all the books they want to read are in English, and so they're reading in English constantly. So reading in a different language is gonna help you, especially if it's a book that you do know really well. Like for me, in like The Long Walk or A Chocolate War, like I know those books really, really well. So reading them in French is not as difficult as they would be otherwise. I also have this book called Vivre à Paris, which is just like, it's just like about Paris, and it's got a lot of pictures, but it's in French, so I count it there too. I also have a couple of different grammar books. I have this simple French grammar book, which is just reading it, and then I have Cambridge 3, like year 3. It's an old Cambridge French textbook, I think for like the 3rd year of French, so it's actually very, very much on my level. It's simple enough for me. Like it's a little bit easy sometimes, I would say, but it's not. There are some vocabulary they don't really know. Vocabulary is, I think, my real weakness. I think my French professor from college would maybe say that it's the fact that I make up grammar if I don't know what it's supposed to be. But you know, I think vocabulary is my weakness, and that's gonna be a weakness in any language, because especially if you come from a language where you know so much. Because I read so much, so I have a large vocabulary in English, and then I go to French where I'm like, I don't know how to express the things I need to express, and it's difficult. I think vocabulary is definitely my weakest point. So which the best? is a hard question. I think it really depends on what you're kind of looking for. Obviously, the best is having an actual teacher, but that's not possible for everybody or most people, really. After that, I've really been enjoying the Cambridge book. If you find like an old French textbook that doesn't have like gimmicks and just makes you write stuff out and just makes you like translate stupid sentences and just makes you do the grunt work, honestly, it's going to be boring as hell, but it's going to get the job done. There's a reason it's been used for so long, and that's because it gets the job done. Repetition is how you do that. Obviously, I think reading books in another language is going to help you no matter what. I do think I am excited to get through Monster Blood, even though they renamed Evan. I think they named him Christoph. His name Evan's not Christoph. It's great. But yeah, I think reading books in another language is always gonna do it. Duolingo, I don't think actually really probably teaches you any French, but it does keep you in the French mindset, which is helpful, I think. So I think, and the free version is not that bad. Like, maybe don't pay for Duolingo. I did for a year, and then I lost my streak. I'm like, if I'm not even gonna keep my streak, why am I paying for this? So I stopped paying for it. Like, don't pay for it, but the free version is not bad, and it honestly probably makes you better because you're being more careful because you don't want to lose your stupid little hearts. So there's that. Yeah, I think that. Oh, Read and Think French. That's another one I skipped. Read and Think French is like, it's just a book of like articles, which I haven't delved too far into it, but I think it's going to be a good one. I think if you're continuously using this language and continuously going into the language and trying to figure out and trying to actually think in it, because that's one thing that the Introduction to the French in Action book does bring up, is that you cannot go into learning another language by translating everything in your stupid little head, because it takes way too much time. Like, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna think and you translate it, and then you think of your response and you translate that. You have to learn to think French. Like, you can't look at, I don't know, like, I think the example they used in French in Action was like, you see a video of somebody swimming, and underneath they have il nage, and you can't just think, oh, he swims. Okay, you have to associate that word with the act of swimming, not the word swim, which is it's a hard thing to do, especially if you're learning it when you're older. That's why it's so much easier to learn a language when you are a child, because you don't have those preconceived notions of what should be what, as you do when you're older. So I started learning French when I was 14. Yes. Yeah, I was 14 in 9th grade. And even that, I mean, that's a little bit late. I mean, that's why Europeans learn languages when they're so young, and they're so much better for it, at least in terms of language acquisition. But yeah, if you start, the younger you start, the better off you'll be, obviously. But that's no saying that you can't start whenever, because it's just an exercise for your brain. It's going to help you not get dementia. Learning multiple languages. So yeah, I guess I don't really know, other than obviously getting a real teacher, in-person teacher is the best option. But after that, I think it really is a lot of trial and error. When I'm watching TV shows is always big. I have a couple of Disney movies on VHS in French that I haven't watched yet. I have Lion King, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'm so happy to find The Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's great. Also, music, French music. It reminds me of Notre Dame de Paris. The best is a musical that I watched in French class in college, and I love it. I also have that on VHS. Yeah, music is one thing. That'll also help you with like your pronunciation, how things are actually supposed to sound. I think pronunciation was never as hard for me because I didn't actually learn phonics, English phonics, when I was a child. I just didn't. I knew how to read before that, so I'd never learned the English phonics. I just didn't. So, which led to a bunch of, embarrassing moments in childhood where things are not said the way that I thought they were, because I just read them out of a book and never knew the actual phonetical situations. But because I didn't have the English phonics background, the French phonics were so much easier than they were for other people. So yeah, there's a lot. But I do think that definitely, like, learning a second language is always a good thing. It's always a good thing to learn something that's difficult, I mean, like, learning a second language is one of the, especially as an adult, is one of the most difficult things you can do. If I had to pick another one, I would probably honestly, because French is, I was an English major, and French is like the second best language to learn if you are an English major because of how big culturally France has been for hundreds of years. The best would be Latin because of just the Latin tradition, everything like that. So if I had to pick another one, it'd be Latin, which again, I did kind of dip my toes into a little bit of Latin, and with my French knowledge, I don't think it'll be as difficult as it would be otherwise. But yeah, that is that. That's everything. If you have any questions, I don't know. There's that. That's everything. Goodbye.